I hear people say that the Democrats have crossed the Rubicon. Once they've done this, there's no going back, and now it's game on. We've hit the point of no return. That's what that means. Crossing the Rubicon means we've passed the point of no return. Once this thing happens, there's no going back. It's in reference to Julius Caesar in the year 49 BC. Now, my thesis here is that the people who make that claim, the people who say we've crossed the Rubicon, they do not even realize how on the nose that is. Like that's way, like, we're going to talk about why Caesar crossed the Rubicon. Why did he cross the Rubicon? It's not just that he crossed the Rubicon. Why did he cross the Rubicon? And once you realize that, you'll see that there's quite a few parallels to what's going on right now. Now, before we proceed, especially when dealing with ancient history, I want to be careful to not make too many specific comparisons. So I am not saying Trump is like Julius Caesar, or Trump is like Pompey, or that Biden is Crassus, or he would actually be like George Soros. But whatever. My point is, like, no one is exactly like, a politician from 2,000 years ago in the context of ancient Roman politics. Like, I'm not here to play that game. The systems are wildly different. It's not fair to say, oh, this faction, they're like the Democrats, and this is like the Republicans. I'm not here to do that. But there's still lessons that we can learn here. Right? So I don't want to be like, oh, no, Trump is the one who's like Julius Caesar. Or, how dare you compare Trump to Julius? That's not my point. I think it'll be clear when we're done here. All right. So here's the deal. Here's the background. A couple people you need to know. Cato the Younger and Julius Caesar. So Cato was the most outspoken guy in the Senate. He never was the consul. He never went above Senate, but he was the top dog in the Senate, and no one messed with Cato. There were two guys who did not like Cato, but they couldn't go after him themselves for different political reasons. So they're like, we need to get someone else. We need some other guy that can rise up and take on the power of Cato. And they found this guy that no one's ever really heard of, Julius Caesar. He was this general, and he just conquered and was in charge of Spain, quite a distance away. And they said, hey, Jules, I don't know what they called him for short, hop back over to Rome and run for consul. So there's two consuls, and this was the highest elected office that you could have in Rome. There are two of them, and they served 1-year terms at the same time. All right, but there's two. And the idea was that, there won't be one dictator if we get two guys here, right? Now, Cato hated Caesar because Caesar was an outsider, came from a nothing family. He didn't like this guy. So Cato did everything he could to keep Caesar from even running for consul, and then did everything he could to keep him from winning consul. So he actually called up the CEO of Dominion Voting Machine. No, again, that's not exactly 1-to-1. That's what I'm getting. Anyway, Caesar won. All right, so Caesar's the new consul. The guy who got second place is the co-consul, but they're both equal. It's not like president and vice president. You're both equal consuls. And that guy's name was Marcus Calpurnius Bibulus. It's a terrible name. Bibulus? That's not. What if Caesar's name was Bibulus? That wouldn't work. Like Julius had a cool name, Julius Caesar, not Bibulus. Anyway, so Bibulus is the co-consul. Are you with me so far? All right. So Caesar's first act was to redistribute land to veterans and poor people. And obviously the rich hated it. But there was so much support for this, no one dared speak against it, except Cato. So it's about to pass, and Cato gets up, and he filibusters. And all he's got to do is talk until the end of the day, and the bill is dead. I don't know what weird procedural Robert's Rules of Orders they had in ancient Rome, but that was the deal. If he talked until the end of the day, and I don't know if the end of the day was like 5 o'clock or midnight. I don't exactly know the details of that. Also, they didn't have watches, so I don't like the sundial. I don't know. Whatever. He had to go to the end of the day. So he was going to do it because he could talk forever. So Caesar had him arrested. So Caesar arrested Cato and threw him in prison. And so Caesar's like, all right, to heck with you people in the Senate. We're going to go right to the people on this one. So they go to the Roman Forum, and he's going to call for a vote to the people, but he has all these other leaders step up and give support to this bill, again, to redistribute the land. And then he goes to his co-consul. He says, hey, Bibulus, what do you think of this bill? This is great, isn't it? And Bibulus says, you shall not have this law this year, not even if you all wish it. So it ain't happening. Forget it. And he left. And the people hated that answer. It was one thing to be against it. It was another to be like, I don't care what any of you think. I don't care what all of you think. It ain't happening. So the mob attacked him. And they took his fasces. That was the symbol of power. It was this, the fasces was a bundle of sticks with an axe in the middle. There's fasces all over D.C. The Lincoln Memorial. If you ever, next time you look at the Lincoln Memorial, the chair that he's sitting in, that Abe is sitting in, the arms of the chair going all the way down are fasces. So it was the symbol of power back in ancient Rome. So, it was power back in ancient Rome. In America, it took on this symbol of unity because you can break one stick, but you can't break a bundle of sticks. That was the idea. And then Mussolini took it over again, and that's where you get the word fascism. Fascism just means bundle of sticks. That's like fascism isn't some like highfalutin word that means, government owns means of production. It just means a bundle of sticks. The U.S. House, next time you see a picture of the U.S. House, there's two giant gold fasces on the wall. Huge. They're huge on either side of the rostrum up there. And that one actually has the axe on it as well. Anyway, so the people, so Bibulus says, you're never going to get this law no matter what. I don't care what any of you say, even if all of you want it, it's not going to happen. So the people took his fasces and they smashed it. And then they beat him up and they poured feces on him. We're talking about fasces and feces. Fasces and feces. They broke the fasces, poured the feces all over. So this guy Bibulus is so traumatized, he never left his house again. That was the end. He's out. So Caesar, this is a true story. I'm not making this up. So Caesar was the lone leader. He's the guy in charge now. So he just starts passing bills. He just starts doing everything. Now, this is important. This is the first important thing. Every single thing that Caesar passed in that year was technically illegal because it didn't also have the support of the co-consul Bibulus. Because Bibulus had number 2 poured on him and he was traumatized and couldn't do it anymore. All right. So keep that part in mind. All right. So time passes and then Caesar goes off and he conquers France, Gaul. So he's the leader over in that territory now. So again, you're only a consul for a year, but then you become proconsul, which has these other things, but whatever. So he goes off and he takes over Gaul. This is the second important thing. When he was the leader of France, he was immune from prosecution. All right, that is essential point number 2. When you were one of these top leaders, consul or proconsul, or in this case, he was also governor of France, he's immune from prosecution. Here's the thing. 10 years go by, and Caesar's term, his official legal term in Gaul of governor, was ending. 10 years. Cato still hated Caesar more than ever. He had Caesar derangement syndrome. He said, all right, Jules, the second that your term as governor of France is over, I am going to prosecute you for every crime I can possibly think of. And I'm going to go, 10 years past, I'm going to go all the way back to when you were consul in Rome. I don't forget that. I'm going to go all the way back 10 years ago when you were consul and you passed all those laws unilaterally without Bibulus. And I'm going to go even further than that. I'm going to go back to all the time when you were the head of Spain. And of course, we're going to prosecute you for everything you've done in the last 10 years at Gaul, all the corruption and bribery and lining your own pockets and everything. The law's broken up the wazoo, I'm sure. I'm sure there's some business record that you forged in the continuance of a federal election law. So I'm going to prosecute you, Cato said to Julius Caesar. All right. So, you with me? Caesar wanted to be consul again. Now, who knows exactly why? But perhaps one of the main motivations, I don't know if this was a main motivation or if this was just a cherry on top, But one of the reasons that it was good for him to be consul again was he would keep his immunity from being prosecuted. Now, he's in France. To run for consul, you have to be in Rome. You have to be in Rome. You can't run, they call it in absentia. He tried, or his buddies back in Rome, what's the better word for buddies? What's the official word for buddy? His, not colleagues, allies, I guess. His friends in Rome tried to pass a law. I actually did. I think they did pass it, that he could run in absentia, but it either passed and they took it away, or it didn't pass, whatever. It didn't work. So he had to go to Rome. But in order to be in Rome, Caesar had to give up his army. If Caesar gave up his army, he'd be prosecuted. All right? So you see the pickle that Caesar's in? His time was running out, which means he was going to be prosecuted. So he's like, okay, I'm going to run for consul. Okay, to run for consul, you got to be in Rome. No problem. Oh, wait, to be in Rome, you got to give up your army. And the second you give up your army, we're going to prosecute you. So Caesar had a choice. He could either give up his army and run for office in Rome. And he had to, right? He was against the clock because his term in Gaul was running out. So he could give up his army, run for office in Rome, go to Rome, and run for office, but he was going to be prosecuted the second he stepped foot. And then, I should say also the consequences of being prosecuted would be either executed or exiled. There's no way Cato, people today are like, what are they going to do to Donald Trump on July 11th? Maybe they'll just give him a little slap on the wrist. Don't think so. But whatever, we can all have our opinions on that. But for Julius Caesar, there was going to be no slap on the wrist coming from Cato. So they were going to execute him or exile him. So he could do that, right? Give up his army, go to Rome, give up the army, go into Rome, run for consul, get arrested, be killed. That was option one. Or bring his army into the city. There really wasn't a third option, because if he did nothing, if he's like, fine, I'm just not going to run anymore, he would still risk prosecution from Cato, whether he was running or not, right? Because they hated him so much. Caesar derangement syndrome. So on January 10th, 49 BC, Caesar crossed over a little river called the Rubicon. The Rubicon's a weird river because you've heard this expression before, crossing the Rubicon. I always assume it's this giant river. It's like large, hard to cross thing. It's not, it's just like a little stream. And this river was the dividing line between Rome and Gaul, which Caesar was in charge of. And he crossed over with his army. And that is against the law. And that is what then started the Civil War. So I'll yada, yada, yada from this point forward. 5-year-long Civil War. I don't know what I think they just call it Caesar's Civil War. Is that what it's called? Yeah, Caesar's. Do they have another name for it? I think they just call it that. Caesar's Civil War. So that was 5 years. He won, became dictator for life. And then he was stabbed 5 years later. Et tu, Brute!